Hey guys, Dad6 back with another Harlowe video, this time focusing on her action skills, augments and capstones, thanks to Brian Central over on YouTube, who's worth checking out. So in this video, we'll be showing off her 3 action skills as well as all the augments for those skills and the end of branch capstones. Finally, we'll be running through all her passives in each of her trees. First though, let's look at her trait as it feeds into her action skills. It's called Entanglement. Whenever Harlowe uses an action skill on enemies, those enemies become entangled, which places this triple ring icon over their health bar, as well as giving them an oil slick-like visual effect. Entangled enemies share a portion of gun damage and skill damage with all other entangled enemies. Now, this sounds insane, but it starts at a low 7%. This amount can be increased with passives in her tree. So yes, Entanglement makes Harlowe insanely good in co-op, but she's also good with ragdoll effects, which we'll see soon. Her first skill is 0 Point. Activating it places an enemy in a stasis bubble for a duration. Enemies immune to stasis take damage instead, like large or boss creatures. The devs mention you can build around this damaging effect, so the skill is still useful. Activating the skill again will cause an enemy to be slammed into the ground in the direction that Harlowe is facing and creates a small explosion which spreads the entanglement effect. This is cooler than it sounds, as you'll be able to pick up and essentially throw enemies into other targets, sort of like you're a Jedi. You'll notice that the immune damage is double that of the slam damage, so it's not a small amount. It lasts 10 seconds and has a mid-length cooldown of 35 seconds. Her next skill is one Gearbox had not shown off in their trailers: Flux Generator. Harlowe throws her Flux Generator in front of her, which projects an energy field, dealing cryo damage over time in pulses and entangles enemies. Allies inside the energy field gain overshield. So yes, this is very defensive, keep that in mind. You can also press F to pick it up and toss it out again, so you can move it with you, but that doesn't impact the 22-second duration by pausing it, it keeps running. Picking it up will also disable the effect until you replace it back down. It lasts 22 seconds and has a large cooldown of 55 seconds. Her final skill is one I showed off a lot in my last video: Chroma Accelerator. You fire an unstable energy pocket which passes through enemies and deals cryo damage. Activating it again will cause the pocket to explode, dealing heavy radiation damage in a large area. The pocket also explodes if it hits terrain. After a short windup, that is. The detonation damage is huge, so you want to make sure you aim and land it well. It has a mid-length cooldown of 38 seconds. All 3 of these skills are just in their basic form. You can add 1 augment and 1 capstone to them to further modify. Let's start with 0 Point augments and capstones within the Seize the Day tree. Strange Attractor is first, and it makes it so when Harlowe shoots an enemy with a gun, bullets ricochet off that enemy onto all enemies in stasis. If Harlowe crits an enemy while the skill is active, that enemy becomes entangled. So this is a way to further lean into 0 Point being a crowd control skill. You bubble one enemy, then focus on the others. The bubbled enemy starts taking damage from your gun's bullets hitting another enemy, and if you crit, they start taking damage from the entanglement effect. So locking down the biggest threat seems to be key to Strange Attractor. Next is Peer Review. Whenever an enemy enters stasis, spawn a homing rejuvenating projectile that targets Harlowe or her allies once the enemy is slammed, killed, or stasis ends. The projectile grants decreased action skill duration rate and increased action skill cooldown rate for a duration. If the target is in fight for your life, they immediately gain second wind as if they killed an enemy. So this sounds like it's turning Harlowe into a group healer, or buffer rather, but really what it's doing is giving your action skill a 50% cooldown reduction, which is huge, and a small buffer if you die to get back up without having to kill an enemy. The minus 50% skill duration seems detrimental, but you'll be firing off your action skills so much more often it doesn't matter. Also, the projectile hits after the bubble has done its job, so the reduced duration will only apply to your next cast. How this will affect your allies remains to be seen, but I can't imagine it's a bad thing having more action skill uptime. Moving down into the left branch, we have Wildcat Destabilization. Entangled enemies take bonus 25% radiation damage from Entangle. Whenever Harlowe deals radiation gun damage to an enemy, restore action skill duration. Whenever Harlowe kills an enemy in stasis, create a radiation nova. The radiation nova deals bonus damage based on remaining action skill duration. So on its own, the bonus entanglement damage is nice, 25% more on top of the 7% base. But the big thing is the action skill restoration when you deal gun damage. A fast-firing Vladoff will have your action skill up in no time at all, as we know it can empty clips fast. The Radiation Nova is icing on the cake. Keep in mind you can slam an enemy into another enemy, which will kill the first and set off the Radiation Nova. The capstone of the branch is Falling Bodies. By activating the skill, you now place an additional enemy in stasis at the cost of action skill duration. When the stasis ends, automatically slam all enemies straight down, meaning you get the bonus damage without having to cast it. Now, sacrificing the action skill duration is a way of nerfing the corrosive nova effect of Wildcat destabilization, because you'll now get 2 explosions instead of 1. But the best thing about this is putting 2 into stasis, which I don't need to tell you is insane crowd control. So this branch has a focus on radiation damage and area of effect damage. But straight down means you don't throw them into targets anymore. The middle branch has cold storage. All damage dealt to enemies in stasis is stored. Whenever an enemy is slammed or stasis ends, create a cryo explosion based on all stored damage, centered on that enemy, and it also automatically freezes other enemies nearby. That all sounds insane, but it does have a maximum damage storage amount, so this augment encourages you to bubble one target, then focus on that target to deal a large amount of damage and freeze in an AoE around it. Unlike Strange Attractor, which encourages the opposite. Cold Plunge is the capstone of this branch, and it makes it so whenever Harlowe slams an enemy, you create a singularity on that enemy, followed by a cryo explosion. So you'll be getting the cold storage damage effect, as well as the cryo explosion and singularity effect, which is cold damage over time. Meaning that this branch is all about cold damage and burning one select target down in order to melt all targets around it, or defrost all targets around it, whatever. You're throwing them around like ragdolls. The rightmost branch starts with the Augment Inertia. Whenever an enemy Harlowe has in stasis dies, a new enemy is automatically added to stasis. When this happens, Harlowe's action skill duration resets, however it drains quicker. This is a cumulative, so eventually it will stop chaining. With this augment, you want to quickly target down the enemy in stasis so the effect spreads and you keep enemies around you helpless. Or slam them all to the ground with Ground State. Every time Harlowe slams an enemy, gain increased slam damage and slam damage radius. You press the action skill button to slam all enemies in stasis. Yes, there are passives that help put more enemies into the effect. So this branch is all about mass crowd control rather than focusing on an element. Overall, I'm not sure what to think about 0 Point. I like the idea of feeling like a Jedi, but it seems like it would be better in a co-op setting. I prefer to dish out the pain in flashy ways rather than mitigate damage when playing solo, but the radiation branch does seem like it can do some serious AoE damage if built correctly. So let's go through the passives with Quantum Immortality. Whenever Harlowe entangles an enemy, she gains health regeneration. Fairly straightforward, use your action skill, get more health regeneration. Moving on over, we have Parallel Circuit. After triggering or re-triggering an action skill, Harlowe gains increased gun damage. So especially using 0 Point where you can activate it, then slam the target down, you can get multiplicative gun damage. Then we move over to Pulse Drive. Harlowe gains increased action skill cooldown rate. This is just always good for any build, as you'll be using your action skill quite often with Harlowe. Then we move over to Make Extraordinary. Harlowe gains critical hit chance with all skills. This chance increases every time Harlowe entangles an enemy. This effect stacks. So you'll be casting your action skill, you'll be getting critical hit chance, and you'll be getting additional critical hit chance every time you entangle, which you'll be doing when you cast your skills. So you can see this is multiplicative as well. Then we move down a tier to Periodic Table Flip. Harlowe gains increased elemental damage, status effect application chance, and cryo effectiveness. This is just good for most builds, as you will be using a lot of radiation and cryo damage effects across all trees, and of course with your weapons. Then we move on across, and we've already seen peer review the augment, but in the middle of that we have Negative Entropy. Harlowe gains increased gun handling. This bonus is doubled while an enemy is in stasis. Then we move on over to Strange Attractor, which we've seen already, and then Bright Future. Whenever Harlowe triggers or re-triggers an action skill, she gains increased fire rate. Once again, activating and re-triggering is very easy with 0 point, so you will be firing faster, and with a lot of augments, a fast fire rate is very beneficial, which is one of the reasons why I went through the augments first. Moving on down, we have, for a single point, Ripple Effect. It's a kill skill, so whenever you kill an entangled enemy, automatically entangle another nearby enemy. So this is a way beyond just your action skills to entangle targets. Moving across, you need at least 1 point in negative entropy to get Precision Engineering. Harlowe just straight up gets increased critical hit damage. Then moving across, we have 2 Coolant for Schoolant. Whenever Harlowe deals cryo damage, gain increased action skill cooldown rate. So you'll be doing a lot of cryo damage with Harlowe, so you'll be getting an increased cooldown rate and you'll be firing off your action skills a lot faster. So keep that in mind when you are looking at her action skills and at her augments, as a lot will add that cryo effect. Then we move on to Cryodynamics, which requires 1 point in periodic table flip. Harlowe gains increased cryo damage. So once again, cryo is a big thing in this tree and with Harlowe in general. Now we move on down to the first branch and we get Concurrence. Harlowe gains increased action skill duration for every entangled enemy. So you want to be spreading that entangled effect around, which is not too hard with Wildcat Destabilization, but we've already gone through that. Then we have Force of Will. Whenever Harlowe critically hits an enemy, daze that enemy. Dazed enemies have decreased movement speed and attack speed. Daze can stack, so this is simply debuffing your enemies. Moving on down, 1 point in Force of Will will get you access to Slingshot. Whenever Harlowe dazes an enemy, she also entangles them. Now that daze effect is looking a lot better. She then gains increased movement speed. So what we can see from a lot of action skills and augments is that spreading that entangled effect is very, very effective. Then we have Control Group. It's a kill skill. Killing an entangled enemy, like I just mentioned, entangling is really good, restores a portion of Harlowe's action skill cooldown and action skill duration. Once again, very good if you want to fire off your action skills very often. Then we move on down to Freeze Frame for 1 point. Harlowe's guns deal bonus cryo damage for every enemy she has in stasis. So you want to be spreading that stasis effect to a lot of enemies and you'll be dealing a heck of a lot of damage with a max stack of 10, which actually brings it up to 100% bonus cryo damage. Then we have the Capstone, which we've already looked at. You can place additional enemies in the stasis. Then we have Stun Lock. Whenever Harlowe critically hits an enemy, she briefly puts the enemy into stasis. This form of stasis lasts for a short duration or until the enemy is shot again. So with Stun Lock, that combos with all of these abilities in this tree, especially Freeze Frame, which gives you a lot more damage. So like I mentioned, this branch is really good at stun locking your targets. Then we move on over to the middle branch with Unstable Isotrope. It's a kill skill. Harlowe gains bonus cryo damage with all sources. So just good all around, because the aim of the game is to actually kill enemies. You can't go a pacifist build, so you'll always be growing your cryo damage. Then we have the Augment Cold Storage, which we've been through already. Then we have Keep Ice on That. All cryo damage Harlowe deals gains Lifesteal. If Harlowe's health is full, she gains Overshield instead, and this is absolutely insane. So you'll be constantly keeping yourself healthy, and when you're not taking damage, you'll be getting extra shield, so you become even more tanky. And of course, you'll always be doing cryo damage, especially if you've gone down this branch. So let's go down the branch. Whenever Harlowe freezes an enemy, she gains increased action skill cooldown rate with Heat Sink. So once again, very good. You want to be casting your action skill very often. 1 point in Flash Freeze. Whenever Harlowe deals cryo damage with an action skill, she gains a chance to freeze that enemy. So you'll be putting him into stasis and you'll be freezing them. That's a 30% chance. It's not bad at all. Especially when you consider if you slam an enemy into another enemy, you get a chance to freeze the enemy that just got slammed as well, which is really kicking them when they're down. Endothermic reaction. Whenever Harlowe freezes an enemy, create an endothermic aura that deals constant cryo damage to enemies around it. Harlowe's endothermic aura deals increased damage based on her overshield. The more full, the greater the bonus. So you can see how that works with flash freeze, how that works with keep ice on that with its overshield. This is overall a very synergistic tree so far. Then moving down, we have a 1-point passive triple point. Whenever Harlowe deals non-cryo damage to an entangled enemy, she deals bonus cryo damage to that enemy. If she deals cryo damage to an entangled enemy, she deals increased bonus damage. So it does give you a little effect if you aren't using a cryo weapon, but you absolutely should be using a cryo weapon because you get a huge 30% bonus damage dealt, and everything in this tree really wants you to be doing cryo damage. Then we have Cold Plunge, and of course it's the capstone, and we've already run through this. You create a singularity on an enemy followed by a cryo explosion, and that just triggers absolutely everything in this tree. So far, this branch has been a real slam dunk when it comes to cryo explosions and slamming targets into other targets. Then we move on over to the final branch of the Seize the Day tree. Harlowe gains increased splash damage, and that works really well with inertia and her capstone, but we've already gone through that. Experimentation is next. Is a kill skill. Killing an entangled enemy causes an elemental explosion on all other entangled enemies. Elemental explosion damage, yeah, we've got indiscrete math here, which increases the splash damage, so it all is going to work together, you'll see. We move on down to sustained reaction. It's a kill skill as well. Killing an entangled enemy restores a portion of Harlowe's action skill duration, so you'll be able to use your action skill more often. But then we have domino effect. Whenever Harlowe deals splash damage to an entangled enemy, she gains a chance to trigger entangled damage share again. So you'll be doing more damage share the more splash damage you do, and the more splash damage you do, obviously, the more elemental explosions you'll set off. So domino effect is quite literally a domino effect. Then with ground state, that all works together with the increased slam damage and the increased slam damage radius, which does get the boost from indiscrete math. Then we move on over to Gordon Knot, which requires 1 point in experimentation, which is this passive up here. It's a kill skill. Whenever Harlowe kills an entangled enemy, she gains a chance to instantly fully restore her action skill. So of course, you'll be getting this ground state bonus much more often. So now that you've seen all the augments and all the capstones of 0 point, with the passives, you can kind of see how they work together in this perfect synergy to just make them come alive. Next is the Cosmic Brilliance tree, which has the action skill Flux Generator. Coronal Mass Ejection is the first augment. Enemies inside Harlowe's Flux Generator lose all elemental resistances. Harlowe and her allies inside gain increased status effect chance. Now, losing all resistances is extremely strong against tough enemies. It means that they will take 100% damage at all times, so you can use corrosive against shields and still hit as hard as if they weren't there. You and your allies will want to stay in the Flux Generator for that 100% status effect chance as well as the overshield, since it's a huge modifier. Blue Giant is the next augment, and it makes her Flux Generator gain increased radius. Additionally, when she re-triggers Flux Generator, she creates a cryo hazard where her Flux Generator was located and a radiation hazard wherever she next places it. Only one of these hazards can be active at a time, but it means you're encouraged to move them around. I personally don't like having to move turret-like effects in games, so I can't see myself using this for more than the 50% radius, but hazards could very well work with your build, so keep it in mind, especially with a capstone coming up. The left branch's augment is Unified Theory. It gives her Flux Generator increased action skill damage, and this effect is increased based on how many allies and enemies are inside of it. 10% per ally and enemy in the radius, meaning that this is most beneficial placed on big groups of enemies or when you have a lot of allies. I feel like the latter will be more rare, even in co-op games, as the radius is not so big to have you all stand still in it, and the effects are not so powerful to be a big enough reward for doing so. I mean, damage and overshield is nice, but without testing this with a lot of allies and synergistic passives, it's hard to tell for sure. The capstone is potential transference. Flux Generator now has 3 charges. Whenever Harlowe relocates her Flux Generator, it teleports to a location in her crosshairs, consuming a charge and creating a shock burst that deals shock damage to enemies inside it. It grants a free second wind to allies and heals allies within the Flux Generator. So now it makes more sense why Unified Theories wanted allies within the generator. It heals them and keeps them safe. Having charges means perhaps you can place multiple of them, but I haven't tested this out. However, if you use the teleport effect, it deals shock damage, and if you have on the blue giant augment, you'll be able to target down where you want those radiation hazards. Also, if your friend is in fight for your life mode, throwing this on them will instantly resurrect them and heal. So yes, Harlowe will make for an excellent support, and this branch seems to be focused on that. The next branch though starts with Nuclear Winter. Whenever Harlowe and her allies are inside the Flux Generator radius, they deal bonus cryo damage. Whenever Harlowe and her allies leave the Flux Generator's radius, they instead deal bonus radiation damage for a duration. Whenever Harlowe inflicts cryo or radiation status effects, the enemy becomes entangled. So this effect straight up increases your DPS by essentially 25% if you don't factor in resistances and weaknesses. Simply put, you want to stay put to get the most out of the bonus cryo damage, then when the action skill expires, you get 12 more seconds of radiation damage bonuses, which means only an 11-second downtime until you can cast the action skill again. If, of course, you have absolutely no way of decreasing its cooldown. Keep in mind too that entangling enemies with your gun is going to be extremely powerful, as you'll be able to paint all the targets that you need. The capstone of the branch is Violent Horizon. Harlowe's Flux Generator occasionally shoots radiation projectiles at nearby enemies outside of its radius. If these projectiles irradiate an enemy, the Flux Generator then drags them within its radius. If you re-trigger the skill, Harlowe's Flux Generator creates a singularity burst that drags in nearby enemies and increases action skill power. Okay, so this is physics to the extreme. It's a Jedi slamming targets into each other, but this will pull in and ragdoll multiple enemies, which will be a lot more fun than it reads. So clumping all enemies up around the generator has a lot of applications, biggest being your AoE damage is a lot more effective. So this branch is all about cryo and radiation damage bonuses and displacing enemies. The final branch of Cosmic Brilliance starts with the Augment Perpetual Engine. When Harlowe activates her Flux Generator, she gains damage reduction and increased action skill duration for each entangled enemy and each additional enemy she entangles while her action skill is active, meaning that she becomes tankier and the flux lasts longer for each enemy hit and each you spread the effect to. A longer duration is never a bad thing, so let's check out why with the capstone. Group Study. Harlowe spawns a Halo Sidekick for each ally instead of her Flux Generator. Halo Sidekicks automatically fly to each ally and hover near them, granting increased gun damage, fire rate, and reload speed. If you re-trigger the action skill, you overload the Halo Sidekick to increase their effectiveness. This stacks. While overloaded, Harlowe's action skill duration drains faster, but the action skill actually has a new duration of 25 seconds and a cooldown now of 32. So this completely changes the skill to buff all your allies, including yourself. Since it's an action skill, you'll be spreading the entanglement effect between you and your allies, and with Perpetual Engine, you become tankier and extend the duration, letting you overload the effects more and more. So if you like straight up gunplay, this might be the capstone you shoot for, pun intended. It's also great, obviously, for group play, which is what this branch seems to focus on. So let's have a look at the passives, starting with Main's Hum. Harlowe gains increased maximum shield capacity and increased maximum overshield capacity, which obviously works with the skill since the Flux Capacitor gives you overshield as you stand within it. Then we have Personal Observation. Harlowe deals increased melee damage and her melee attacks gain a chance to entangle enemies. So now you have a way to entangle enemies beyond your action skill. It's also the first time we've seen melee damage be a thing with Harlowe, because she seems to be very action skill orientated beyond this particular passive. Action at a distance, which is the exact opposite. Whenever Harlowe applies a status effect to an enemy, she gains a chance to apply that status effect to each entangled enemy. So another way to spread effects across entangled enemies, not just spread the pain. Then we move on over to momentum. Whenever Harlowe entangles an enemy, she and her allies deal increased critical hit damage. So these last three passives seem to all be focused around entangling enemies in some way, and this action skill actually does make it very easily to do that, since it's a big and you can move its effect whenever you really want to. Let's move on down. We have mass function. Harlowe and her allies gain increased reload speed for every entangled enemy. So we have multiple ways to entangle now. We can melee to entangle, so you and your allies can reload much faster. We all know I don't like reload speed buffing things, because usually it only means like a 0.1 second increased amount of DPS, but really this could be good if it's spread over multiple targets, aka multiple allies. Then we move on over to coronal mass ejection, which we've gone through already. And in the middle is neutron decay. Whenever Harlowe irradiates an enemy, she gains increased gun damage. This effect stacks. Now there are multiple ways to irradiate enemies within this tree and within other trees as well. So getting this, even if you're in another tree, can be very effective, because increasing your gun damage is always good. But this will be especially good with a status effect build. So moving over to Blue Giant, speaking of radiation and status effects, this will help you there. Then we move on over to Heat Death. Harlowe gains increased cryo efficiency. So we have radiation effects and we have cryo effects. That's what Harlowe is all about. If you've gone a cryo build in the last tree that we saw, placing just 10 points in this tree will give you more cryo efficiency and make you better overall. So it might be something you splash into. Then we move on down to Creative Overflow. Harlowe deals increased gun damage based on her overshield. The more overshield she has, the bigger the bonus. So now we're turning tank into damage, and you can see it's 12% for just 1 point. It's extremely high. With 3 points, this could be 36 to 40% bonus gun damage based on your overshield. And if you have multiple ways to keep your overshield up, which you do have within this tree, this can make you output some extreme damage. We move on over to Resonance Cascade, which requires 1 point in neutron decay. Whenever Harlowe deals radiation damage to an enemy, she gains increased action skill damage. This effect stacks. So if you've gone a radiation build, this will be always good, because getting off your action skill is always going to be good. Then we move on over to Confirmative Reality. Whenever Harlowe shoots an entangled enemy, she and all her allies restore a portion of their action skill cooldown. Once again, this is always going to be good, especially if you have a lot of ways to entangle enemies, and there are a lot of ways within this tree to do so. Then we have Absolute Zero. Whenever Harlowe freezes an enemy, she receives a stack of 0 point. For every stack of 0 point, her action skill duration freezes for a short time. This is just a fancy way of saying the duration of your action skill will last longer, so you'll be able to keep your action skill up for a longer duration. Therefore, you'll be able to gain more overshield for longer, you'll be able to deal more damage for longer, and you'll be able to spread those effects for longer. Now, the first branch has Blue Shift. While her action skill is cooling down, Harlowe deals bonus cryo damage with her melee attacks. While her action skill is active, Harlowe deals bonus radiation damage with her melee attacks. So this branch has got a lot of bonuses to cryo and radiation damage together. And if you get the passive that allows you to spread the entanglement effect by meleeing, you might want to pick this up, because Harlowe can now melee pretty effectively, and all of these skills will combo together. Then we have Unified Theory, which we've already gone through. Then we have Decoherence. Harlowe deals increased damage with all sources to her entangled enemies. Enemies inside of her Flux generator take further increased damage. So you want to be spreading that entanglement effect, you want to be getting him within the Flux generator, you want to be inside the Flux generator yourself for that overshield and therefore bonus damage. And then you want to be meleeing them because you have multiple ways to melee, and because they're in a small bubble, you're up close anyway, so it's all perfect and it all works together. Moving on down, we have Latent Charge. Harlowe deals bonus damage with guns, melee attacks, and action skills while she has Overshield. The more Overshield she has, the bigger the bonus. So this is yet another way to take advantage of Overshield, which we saw all the way back here with Creative Overflow. So these effects do stack. So you want to be within your Flux generator, you want to be generating that Overshield, and you want to be getting an extreme amount of bonus damage. Who knows, maybe this is a way of making melee effective with Harlowe. Then we move on over to Feedback Loop. Whenever Harlowe entangles an enemy, she gains increased action skill damage, action skill duration, and action skill cooldown rate. This effect stacks. You'll be able to cast your action skill more often, it'll last longer, and it will deal more damage, and you'll be entangling a lot. So this just multiplies with itself, therefore it is that feedback loop as the namesake says. Then we move down to the Capstone, which we saw before. Potential Transference works very well because you can throw the Flux generator at your targets and get all of these juicy bonuses. Then we have the 1-point passive Runaway Reaction. Harlowe gains increased status effect chance. When Harlowe applies a status effect to an enemy, it becomes entangled. So you can just entangle everything around just by shooting at it with this passive. This almost feels like the Capstone to me because you will be spreading that entanglement effect. You'll be getting all the bonuses from the entanglement effect all the way back up here as well. So this will all work together beautifully for a nice combo of pain. Let's move over to the middle branch with Gamma Ray Burst. When Harlowe re-triggers her action skill, the next shot fired from her gun drains her shield and deals bonus radiation damage based on the amount drained. So if you have Overshield, it's not really going to hurt you a whole lot, but it's going to deal a lot of bonus radiation damage. So you want the percentage very high. Therefore, you want to pick up items and such that increase your maximum shield capacity. This can and will do a lot of damage, but it is that risk-reward factor. Now, moving over to Nuclear Winter, this is yet again another radiation-focused augment, which goes with the tree, which has radiation-focused passives. Harlowe's Certainty Principle gives her increased gun handling, which is further increased with every enemy within her Flux generator. So you're going to be extremely accurate with your weapons. Moving on down, for 1 point we have Jaunt. Pressing and holding V, which I believe is your melee button, lets you swap places with your Flux generator. So if you, for example, throw it out, you'll have a very powerful teleport. It also lets you teleport back to where you placed it if you put yourself in a risky position. So how effective this is based entirely on your skill level. But for only 1 point, it's definitely worth picking up. Then we have Critical Funding, which requires 1 point in Harlowe's Certainty Principle. Whenever Harlowe critically hits an enemy, she gains a chance to entangle it and refills a portion of her gun's magazine. So it's a 15% chance to entangle on critical hit. Getting critical hits isn't that difficult. On bosses, you usually just have to open up a particular weak point, then fire at it. On normal enemies, it's usually their head. Refilling a portion of your gun's magazine, therefore, means getting like a Vladof weapon, a fast-firing weapon, will benefit from this very, very often. You'll be spreading that entanglement effect to almost every enemy you fire on. Then we move on down to Exposed Core. You need 1 point in Gamma Ray Burst for this. While her shield is down, which Gamma Ray Burst actually helps you with since it burns your shield while you fire, Harlowe gains increased status effect chance. And the status effect chance gets up to 100%. So you'll be spreading that status effect around like absolute craziness. And of course, we've seen status effect benefiting passives previously within this tree. Then we move on over to Violent Horizon. This is about radiation projectiles and irradiating your enemy, so status effect, status effect, status effect. Moving across to Meltdown, Harlowe's critical hits with guns deal bonus radiation damage. So, surprisingly, this branch also benefits from critical hits and fast-firing weapons. Moving over to the last branch of this tree, we have Refraction. Harlowe and her allies gain a ricochet chance against entangled enemies. Critical hits double this chance. Ricochets have reduced damage. Now, that's not the important part. The important part is your allies get this chance as well, and there are so many ways of spreading that entanglement effect, especially in these branches here. So you'll be ricocheting bullets all over the damn place, and so will your allies. So I see this being an extremely potent passive if you do have people with you. But even if you don't, ricocheting is always good, and that does stack with Jacob's weapons. Now, moving over to Perpetual Engine, we've already gone through this. It's about damage reduction and action skill duration, based on the amount of entangled enemies. Then we have Excited State. Harlowe gains increased critical hit damage. Whenever an enemy is damaged by Harlowe's action skill, the next shot on that enemy will be an automatic critical hit. So you might even want to pick this up if you go down the middle branch because you really like critical hits. With this branch though, you will be getting your action skill off quite a lot, so you will be getting those automatic crits quite often. Moving on down, we have Accretion. Harlowe and her allies gain lifesteal against entangled enemies. So you get quite a lot of lifesteal for doing something you're gonna do anyway, and it even keeps your allies alive without you having to directly heal them, which is definitely nice because in a game like this, you don't want to stop firing on enemies just to help your allies. Then we move on over to Distribution Function. Whenever Harlowe's action skill damages an enemy, restore a portion of her and her allies' shield capacity. If their shields are full, gain overshield instead. So this is another way to get overshield, and we know with all of the other skills we've been through that getting overshield is very beneficial and actually increases your damage in a lot of cases. What's nice about this is it also helps your allies. Moving on down, for 1 point we have Annihilation. Harlowe's Flux generator occasionally throws grenades. If Harlowe or her allies are inside the Flux generator and have a grenade equipped, it throws a copy of that grenade. So I assume if you and your allies are inside, it chooses your grenade to throw. But still, this will be a very powerful ability. We just don't know how often occasionally throws means. If it occasionally throws it every second, this will be extremely powerful. If it occasionally throws it once during its duration, then not so much. But a free grenade is nothing to scoff at. Then we have Group Study, which we've talked about before. It makes the Halo sidekicks for you and your allies, increasing your gun damage, your fire rate, and so forth, which benefits a lot from all of these passives. Then we have Pencils Down. While Harlowe's action skill is cooling down, she grants herself and her allies increased reload speed and fire rate, and this obviously stacks with Group Study. So this whole branch is all about the group. This is all about keeping you and your allies dishing out the pain and keeping them healthy. So unlike the other branches in this tree, this one is very much a focus on group play, so I wouldn't recommend picking it up if you are solo. But if you don't really care for group play, Chroma Accelerator might be the action skill for you. Within the Creative Burst tree, we have its first augment, Void Star, which makes it so whenever the unstable energy pocket passes by an enemy, that enemy loses 30% health and becomes frozen. Freezing enemies, I don't have to tell you, is a powerful way to crowd control. So this may be better than 0 point for you if you want to hit multiple targets in a line and do extreme damage. The next augment is Neutron Capture. All damage Harlowe's unstable energy pocket deals to enemies is stored. Whenever it explodes, a portion of that stored damage is transferred to Harlowe's gun, causing her to deal bonus radiation damage for 12 seconds. Now, it's unclear if this includes the damage dealt by the energy pocket's explosions, but either way, hitting multiple enemies with this skill will give you some extremely high bonus radiation damage for a duration. So getting a fast fire rate weapon will let you take full advantage. Now, moving down to the first branch, we have the augment Field Research. Whenever Harlowe kills an enemy with her Unstable Energy Pocket, and when she kills an entangled enemy while it's active, refund a portion of her next skill cooldown. 20% per enemy killed, so killing 5 will fully recharge the skill back up, letting her use it again. So spreading the entangled effect and killing multiple enemies will mean more nuking the screen, and I'm sure a lot of you are here just for that. Cue ball though is the Capstone. Harlowe's Unstable Energy Pockets bounces as it travels and can no longer be manually detonated. Each time it bounces, it creates a radiation explosion. Whenever it strikes an enemy, it changes direction and bounces towards another enemy with a maximum of 10 bounces. What you'll note is that this isn't reduced radiation explosion damage, it's the full amount. So Field Research is going to have an absolute field day with this Capstone. Your energy pocket will be out for a longer time, bouncing around, killing things and restoring your action skill cooldown. Getting 5 kills while it's out, painting targets with entangled and exploding on the unlucky ones doesn't seem that hard. So far, this Capstone has me the most excited, as I can't wait to turn the battlefield into a nuclear bomb pool table, which is exactly what this branch is about. Lots of action skill casts and explosions. Moving over to the middle branch, we have the Augment Special Purpose Magnets. Harlowe's Unstable Energy Pocket pulls enemies along as it passes by, and its detonation deals increased damage for every enemy it's already hit, 8% per enemy. So this is another enemy displacement effect which crowd controls them. Very powerful on its own, but the extra explosion damage sure is a nice bonus. I haven't been able to test this, but I wonder if it pulls them off cliffs with it. The Capstone is Demon Core. As Harlowe's Unstable Energy Pocket travels, it shoots radiation darts at enemies. Whenever Harlowe entangles an enemy while her action skill is active, automatically irradiate that enemy. So this is a nice way of adding a lot of DPS. You'll be hitting with fairly powerful darts while it travels, targeting those captured by the energy pocket as well. Entangling enemies also puts the irradiation dot on them. More damage, you really can't complain. So this branch is all about irradiating enemies and pushing them out your way. The final branch has the Augment Containment Breach. Whenever Harlowe's Unstable Energy Pocket detonates, it splits into several smaller, fast-moving pockets. You can see that in the IGN footage where the smaller pockets come out and explode, seemingly tracking enemies randomly. They don't seem to do much lower damage, so this could be quite powerful. The final Capstone is the Shattering Light. It has 5 charges. Chroma Accelerator gains charges as Harlowe keeps it readied for the duration of Chroma Accelerator or until all charges are used. Holding the action skill button ends the Shattering Light early and refunds a portion of the cooldown for every charge remaining. So what you do is you activate the weapon, it's ready, then pressing the action skill again or the fire or aim button will fire fast moving unstable energy pockets consuming 1 charge. That's a lot of words to say. You take out the gun like a heavy weapon and you have up to 5 ammo to spend as it continually gains charges, but you'll be able to fire more over the 21-second duration. So you'll be able to fire more than 5 bullets over the 21-second duration, meaning lots of explosions. If you have Containment Breach, these energy pockets will be cluster bombs too. But with this Capstone, you kind of lose the slow moving damage over time benefit. It does seem like a lot of fun, pulling out this weapon and unloading on multiple targets for big nuclear explosions. So it's yet another branch all about big explosions. Torque would be proud. So now let's take a look at the passives. First up is Cyclotron. Harlowe gains increased fire rate, just straight up increased fire rate, always going to be good. Then we have PPE. Harlowe gains increased maximum shield capacity and shield recharge rate, so just more tank. Then we have Fuzzy Math. Harlowe gains increased status effect chance. So if you're going a status effect build, that's going to be good. Field Ready Prototype. Harlowe gains increased action skill damage. So these are all just very basic passives. You've got fire rate, you've got shield capacity and recharge rate, you've got status effect chance, and you've got action skill damage. All 4 of these are going to be good. Then we move on down to Bleeding Edge. Harlowe gains increased reload speed. I think you could probably give this one a miss in favor of the others up here. Then we have the first augment, Void Star, which we've been through. We don't have a passive in the middle of these 2 augments. Neutron Capture is next, we've been through that as well. Then we have Elementary. This one is buffed currently from the class mod, so ignore the 2 points into it. Harlowe gains increased elemental damage and status effect damage. Harlowe focuses specifically on radiation and cryo damage, so it's going to buff those two equally as much. Then we move on down to test subjects. Whenever Harlowe applies a status effect to an enemy, she gains increased action skill cooldown rate. So if you're going to get this, I recommend picking up Fuzzy Math so you get that increased status effect chance as well, which of course in turn will cool down your action skill much faster. Then we have Get Up and Go. Whenever Harlowe activates or re-triggers an action skill, she gains increased movement speed. So running around faster will mean you can position your action skill better, especially since it hits enemies in a line. Then we have for 1 point, Elephant's Foot. Whenever Harlowe's shield breaks, she deals radiation damage to all entangled enemies. Harlowe gains overshield equal to the amount of damage dealt this way. So that works with a passive in the previous branch that does radiation damage and drains your shields to do bonus damage. So you could probably pick this up if you've picked that up, and they will work very well together, especially because it'll only require you to get 11 points into this particular tree, 5 to get down to the second row, 5 to get down to this third row, then 1 point in Elephant's Foot. Moving across, we have Great Red Dot. Dot is damage over time. Harlowe gains increased status effect duration, which is increased dot damage. Then we move over to Enriched, which requires 1 point in Elementary. Harlowe gains increased radiation damage, just straight up increased radiation damage, which is always going to be good for Harlowe in particular. Then we move over to the first branch, Practical Applications. Harlowe gains increased skill damage. This so far has been very down the line. Just increased damage here and there, increased cooldown rates, so on and so forth, but it does get more complicated. First though, we have Field Research, which we've talked about before. It's about action skill cooldown and refunding cooldown based on enemies killed. Move on over to Carry the One. Whenever Harlowe entangles an enemy, she gains a chance to entangle another nearby enemy. It goes all the way up to 50%, so this is a way to really spread the entanglement effect around very quickly and very often. And if you combine that with other branches in other trees, you'll be entangling everything on the screen fairly easily. Then we move on down to Core Sample. Harlowe gains lifesteal against frozen enemies. If she's at full health, she gains overshield instead, so you want to find ways to freeze enemies, and this branch has just that. Convert all Chroma Accelerator damage to cryo damage. So with 1 point, the explosion that was radiation damage is now cryo, so you will be freezing targets more often, therefore getting overshield or lifesteal depending on what you need. Moving down, whenever Harlowe freezes an enemy, she gains increased action skill cooldown rate. So you freeze an enemy, you get increased action skill cooldown rate, you freeze the enemy again, so on and so forth, all the while you're keeping nice and healthy. Move on over to Cue Ball. Harlowe's unstable energy pocket bounces as it travels. This is the one that's like playing explosive nuclear pool. So you can convert that all to cryo damage, or you can keep it as radiation damage. It's really up to you. But with cold welding, you might want to go with that cryo damage, because whenever Harlowe freezes an entangled enemy, it deals cryo damage to itself and all other entangled enemies. So you'll be playing on the nuclear winter pool table, freezing enemies and entangling everything, doing even more damage because they're entangled and frozen. It's just going to be absolute chaos. So this branch is definitely all about a lot of explosions, a lot of freezing, and a lot of chaos. Then we have the middle branch, Poisoned Sun. Harlowe gains increased radiation damage and irradiation chance. So you can see what this branch is going to be about. Special Purpose Magnus is just the one that pulls enemies along with it. Then we go up to Glow Up. Harlowe gains critical hit chance with guns against irradiated enemies. So you want to be irradiating every enemy you see to get that extra critical hit chance. Then we move down to Fissile Launcher or Fissile Launcher, whatever you want to call it. Whenever Harlowe deals damage to an irradiated enemy or an entangled enemy, shoot a radiation dart at another enemy. And we know those radiation darts spread the irradiation effect, so it's all going to work together very, very nicely. Moving on over to Chain Reactor, Harlowe deals bonus radiation damage to entangled enemies, so yes, it's all going to work very well together, even more so. Then we move on down to Wasted with 1 point. It's a kill skill. Killing an irradiated enemy or killing an enemy with radiation damage leaves behind a radiation hazard, and this hazard deals damage over time and irradiates further enemies. So you're just spreading more damage. Then we move over to Demon Core, which is all about those radiation darts and action skill cooldown and cooldown duration. Then we move over to Dirty Bomb. Whenever Harlowe irradiates an enemy, create a radiation explosion on that enemy of 40% of total irradiated damage. So this is just an absolute ton of damage coming out with this tree. If you like radiation, if you like irradiating enemies, if you like the sound it makes, the Geiger counter sound it makes, which I absolutely love, this is going to be the branch for you. Then the final branch starts with Highly Efficient. It's a kill skill. Whenever Harlowe kills an enemy with a skill, restore a portion of her shield capacity. So just a way to keep you healthy. Then we have Containment Breach, which we've been through before. It just makes additional projectiles when the energy pocket explodes, dealing more damage like a cluster bomb. Then we move over to Mechanical Brilliance. Whenever Harlowe damages an enemy with a skill, she gains increased skill damage. So you'll damage the enemy with Containment Breach, then the clusters will hit for increased damage. Moving on down, Eureka for 1 point. Whenever Harlowe enters the Fight for Your Life mode, she throws a free unstable energy pocket at a nearby enemy if there are any, so that's going to get you back up on your feet because that's a lot of damage coming out that gets all the bonuses from all your other passives. For 1 point, it has to be worth it. Then we move on over to Rounding Up. For every enemy her action skill damages, Harlowe gains increased gun damage when her action skill ends. I can see this being really good with this particular action skill with Special Purpose Magnets for sucking them in, and with Cue Ball for bouncing around on enemies hitting multiple. So this will really stack up the extra damage. And of course, extra gun damage is always going to be good. So moving down for 1 point, QED, it's a melee override. Harlowe now attaches an unstable energy pocket to her fist and slams it into an enemy in front of her. So now you'll be spreading even more unstable energy pocket explosions and therefore more entanglement effects just by meleeing. Now we know there's a passive before that spreads the effect by meleeing, but this is bringing it up to a whole new level because it gets all the unstable energy pocket buffs as well. Moving over, the Shattering Light makes it so you can fire the unstable energy pockets multiple times. Then we have Alternate Fuel Source. Whenever Harlowe activates Chroma Accelerator, drain her shield and amp her next unstable energy pocket. So it'll drain up to 50% of your shield, which is quite a lot, but the next Shattering Light shot will deal a lot more damage. So you can see how these all kind of work together as well. So that's everything. What do you think? Was it worth the long wait to see more of Harlowe? Is she now your main? Let me know below. For everything Borderlands, including first access and guides, you're in the right place. Ciao, friends.